please welcome back to Canadian Music Week a great guy, Pat Holliday.
The people that are out here, let's start with James. This is James Stewart. James, actually, before I start, I got to tell you, because it's an odd group, which in a good way. Everybody here, seriously, everybody here has moved up through the ranks to the positions that they have, which are industry leaders, starting out as a jock, then as a PD, and then GM or something else to the positions that that they have right now, which is kind of rare in this day and age, what I think is great. So I will start with James. James, a PD, great PD, Power 92, Power 106, Calgary, Edmonton, and a bunch of other places. Really knows how to program. At the moment, for Bell Media, he's the Vice President of Radio and TV in the West. Daunting job. He's also the General Manager at the same time of Radio TV in Vancouver and in Victoria, in addition to overseeing TV throughout Alberta. So, I don't know when you sleep, but which we'll delve into. After that, also in the West in Vancouver is Brad Phillips. Brad is Vice President of Radio for Chorus West. He handles all of the FM stations for Chorus in the West. Also a great PD. Did amazing work here in Toronto with Chum FM as its PD and General Manager. And also launching Zed in Vancouver to #1 twice. So, again, really knows her stuff. I'll jump. I had an order I was going to do, but I'll move to Steve. Steve Jones. Steve is the Vice President of Branding and also Programming for NewCap. And Steve, also same thing, great PD in Boston, throughout Canada, and even in the Cayman Islands. And Steve also brings a different perspective, which I think is going to come out and be really interesting here, because Steve is a best-selling author, How to Brand Like a Rock Star, and he does lectures and talks all over the world. In many instances, they're not to radio companies. They're to regular businesses. So he taps something that a lot of people here don't normally see. People that are out of the entertainment industry. Julie Adam is next. Julie is the Senior Vice President for Rogers. She handles all of their radio stations, AM, FM, every format, every strategy, everything. That's Julie. You have a lot on her plate. You know what? I started to send you email. For 15 years, I thought your name had an S on the end. Do you get that a lot?
I do get that a lot, actually.
So I'm sending an email and they're bouncing back. I was like, why is that? And I look and I'm like, oh, it's Adam, not Adams.
My husband would be upset with you, Pat.
Okay.
It's his name.
Sorry, I apologize for everybody for that one. And Christian Hall is the last one. He's the National PD for Harvard Broadcasting, and he is also the local PD for X92.9 in Calgary, the alternative station. Again, a lot of success. Also, he was with Chorus for many years. A lot of PD experience. So you have an amazing amount of people here, on the dais who have great insights. It'd be interesting to listen to Christian for some of his things, because he's the one person here that I think is going to be interesting, because he's David looking up at Goliath for the most part for all the other companies. Different perspective. So let's start this off. And I'm going to start off kind of with an easy one. And I think that everybody has a particular personality traits, or they have seen other people that they've worked for lead in a particular way. And in a pinch, that's what comes out. Either the personality, and that's the way they lead and interact with people, or they emulate. So I'd like to kind of go through everybody. What do you think is your traits, your go-to feelings as you go to, interact with the people that work for you? James?
Well, you may hear this from everybody, but I guess I'll be the first one up, and it may sound cliche, but it's the number one word for me is passion. Passion for this industry, passion for the job, passion for the people, and ultimately a passion to win. There's no question that I want to win. I want to beat all of these people. They want to beat me, and I fully accept that. Yet at the same time, I consider many of them friends, and certainly respect them one hell of a lot, which also is one of the ways that I think the passion shows through as well, rather than just be purely arrogant and egotistical about it and say, well, they don't know what they're doing. They know what they're doing. So passion is the big thing for me.
Okay. Brad?
I would echo that. Passion's huge. Thoughtfulness, I think. I think that this business moves fast, and you get a lot of stimulus every day. You get a lot of things coming at you. I think that the stimulus and then your response to that stimulus, if you can stretch that gap out a bit, and inside that gap comes usually a better response than if you act right away. And to try to just kind of slow things down and just kind of make sure that you're giving the proper thought, I think is important.
Okay, Steve?
I think owning your mistakes and sharing your winnings. Never taking yourself too seriously, trying to be as transparent as possible, as human and real as you can be, and recognize what you're good at and what you're not good at, because you're not good at everything. And surround yourself by people who make up for your shortcomings and make you better because of it.
Okay. Jewel?
Those are great answers. So I think the two, I have a lot of people in this room have been my boss one time or another, and the great management in this room that I learned a lot from. I think the biggest influence for me, though, was my dad, who, I used to bring all my business problems home to him. And what I really learned from my dad and what I admired about him is, he was always kind. He was, he never delivered, he was never a jerk. He was always kind about things. And I think, in being a leader, we have to make tough decisions that are hard, and you don't necessarily want to make those decisions. But I think trying to do them with kindness as best to your ability is really key.
For me, it's about communication. We're not in positions where we are if we don't have great teams. And the better we are at our jobs at communicating, whether it's a strategy or a vision or some really crazy idea, if you can't communicate that properly and get a buy-in from your team, then you're just not going to be able to pull it off. There'll be just no success. We can't all just do it on our own. We need these teams around us, whether our peers or employees or our managers above us. If they can't get on board with what it is you're trying to create or communicate, then you're dead in the water.
Okay, thanks, guys. For the last probably 50 or 60 years, it's been my experience in watching that most PDs pretty much get thrown into the job, which is kind of amazing because, it's 100% of the product that they're controlling and probably 70% of the radio station. And they get, a lot of times, at least in the past, hey, you're the PD, go at it. What? I'm just curious. I'm curious actually two ways. How many people in this room are PDs and kind of got thrown at it or had a little bit of help? Okay. And of you, working your way up, how many got thrown into it or actually were taught?
Both.
Both.
Yeah, a hybrid.
Yeah, a little bit of hybrid?
A bit, yeah.
Okay.
I got thrown into it.
Thrown into it?
I got thrown into it. Now, I learned along the way,
Sure.
maybe by osmosis, whether it was watching someone like Brad or watching other people that I worked with as a PD, and I just sort of sat back and sort of picked up on what they were doing, but there was never any sort of formalized path for me.
And that's what I wonder now, is there more of a formalized path or at least more of a way of grabbing people when they're younger and go like, okay, he or she can be a good PD. Let's train them or let's move them forward. Do you do that now in your companies? Or how does that work if you do that?
I think at NewCap, we don't have a training program like that. I think we should. I think as we grow, we will. But we don't. And the best thing we do right now, we do have mentorship plans. We do have a talent development director, Josie Fenich in Ottawa, is a fantastic person to recognize and develop talent on air and in programming. And when we do promote people to programming jobs, we try to surround them with as much nurturing and leadership and mentoring as we can. But we don't. I wish I could say we did have a formal, PD school. Unfortunately, the things we could teach in that school are things like music scheduling, are things like promotions, are things like all the hard skills. Mm-hmm. But what we can't teach in PD school are the true things that make great program directors, which are the soft skills and the leadership skills. And those things are a lot harder to teach. And if you have those things, I think you can learn all the other things that could make you great.
Right.
And I think it's compounded now by the fact that a lot of our companies are kind of structuring themselves in a way that the PD has even more responsibility in buildings, because a lot of buildings don't have a traditional GM anymore. So a lot of that falls on the PD, some on the sales manager, some on the PD, but there's, so there's a lot. I think one of the benefits of companies that, there's been so much consolidation in the business in the last, 20 years or whatever. And, maybe one of the benefits of bigger companies is that there's, we have a thing called Chorus U, where it's training programs. If you really want to take part in it, just put your hand up and it's all there. And a lot of our people do. So that's stuff that we didn't have before.
Okay, great.
It's good.
I can say I was fortunate enough to learn. I was an APD for 3 years, and it was a very informal, like, APD program, but it certainly, prepared me on the generic skill set of getting that first opportunity. No one is fully ever prepared for their first job as a PD because they're not exactly sure what type of personalities you're going to be dealing with. And I don't mean in the sense of just the jocks, but everybody. You don't know what kind of GSM you're going to be working with every day, or what kind of GM you're going to have. And that's really, what everyone's going to get thrown into, regardless of the situation. But with Harvard, we do have an APD program. And it's not something that we just offer up to anybody. It really does come with a passion play. If we see someone in the company that has that passion for programming, and with it, they're the ones that uninstigated come to us and show us, because we're not out there, dropping lines in the water looking for people to be PDs, because you have to be a special kind of fucked up to be one. Mm-hmm. So
how many people come forward as opposed to, I really want to be a
if it's one every year or one every 2
forward?
years for us, then that's a really good year. But we're 13 stations. We don't have nearly the size and scale of the rest of the companies here on stage. But and a lot of them get into it, but they don't complete it, because it's only then they start to understand just how many layers there are to the job. A music director wants to be a PD, thinks that they can do the job because they kick ass at scheduling songs. Well, that's a good part of it. But then you've got to coach talent, and you got to handle budgets, and you have to, come up with promotions and work with sales. And then you start layering on all of those things, and you see their eyes widen, and they're like, I think I'm good being an MD for a little bit longer, and they drop out. And it's the purpose for the program, because we don't just want to put the first person into the first available PD chair in the company just because they put their hand up.
When you're looking at PD, or actually anything, and maybe for everybody watching here, somebody wants to be the manager of a department, somebody wants to be a PD, somebody wants to be the music director, somebody what are there any specific skills or something in them that you're looking for, as opposed to just somebody just standing there asking? Is there something that you're actually looking for, or I'm asking you for instinct, but to quantify instinct, which is hard, but
I think leadership is. Leadership is key, and now that we are structured, and certainly Rogers is structured very differently than it used to be, and often your manager is not in the same market as you. We need leaders, and
for sure.
To me, that is, if we could do anything, it would be to develop. When we're talking about managers, it's to develop leaders, to develop people that have the ability to communicate, to get others to, buy in, to put their own ego and their own, agenda to one side, to help coach and help others excel and be great at what they do. I think that's the key right now, is finding leaders and looking for leadership. And you can recognize that in people that are inexperienced and not ever been managers and that are young. I think you can see that quite early on.
Okay. It's funny. I remember reading it, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and I think it might have been by Warren Buffett. It was something that he had written down. And it was something to look for in a company, and identify these type of people. But typically in a company, you might have somebody who's actually managing a department, or managing the station, or managing whatever, and they actually are not really the leaders of the actual place. Usually sometimes it's the person that, when a memo comes out, I'd never thought of this before. Like, a memo comes out and everybody isn't quite sure what it says. It's the person that they all go to. What's this mean? you know, and they're actually like the secondary leaders that you don't even realize are in your company. And those are the people that, you know, you, in a perfect world, you'd go like, hey, would you like to be moving up? Because you are actually already have it. It's there, clearly. Everybody comes to you and grab them.
You can walk through any creative department or jock meeting, and you can see those people. They're the people that naturally others follow, and they don't even sometimes realize that they're leaders. And I can think of a specific example in our company of someone who, in the last 6 months, was convinced to become a program director because we saw those leadership traits and saw that that opportunity for them, and went to them and said, you know what, you haven't thought of this before, but you should. And they were actually reluctant at first, and now they're immersed in a PD job and are doing wonderful at it. I mean, we're like a week in, but it's been good.
At a time, that's what our business is,
Yeah.
1 week at a time.
Let me touch on something that probably everybody here absolutely has probably now, and probably most people in this room, if you get into any kind of management position, you're going to have it later on. And that is, you are spread way too thin, more than likely. I don't know if everybody wants to touch that as a hot potato or not. And what I mean by that is, like, I'll start with James, because when he was explaining his, what's on his plate, I was like, wow, how do you lead people? You're managing Vancouver, you're managing Victoria, AM, FM, TV for all about, huge job there, and yet you're covering television for Edmonton and Calgary, and stuff in between. It's like, how do you manage that? I mean, that is an unbelievable skill. How do you manage that?
Well, I don't see my wife very
How do you
often.
lead people like that? Forget management. Actually, that's a bad word to put, because management isn't leadership. You know, you can be a...
Well, you know what? Look, it's a daunting thing for anybody. I think everybody on this panel has a daunting job that we try to do every day, day in, day out. For me, the biggest way that I think we can be successful for our teams is to identify somebody on site, whether that's one person, it might be 2 or 3, depending on the departments, that you know when you're not around, they've got shit covered. They've just got it, and you don't have to worry about it. And every day something's going to happen. Something's going to explode. We all know that. It happens in every department on a regular enough basis that we can almost set our clocks by it. And I think, in the world that I live these days, it really is important to say, okay, if I'm not in Victoria, I know that Heather is the person. And in fact, even when I'm in Victoria, Heather is still the person.
Right.
And it's the same way if I go to Edmonton to go into CTV there. I know who is the person. I know in Calgary who the person is. I've got all of these things in my mind that in at least my world, make me more comfortable to suggest, all right, if it's not me, it's this person. But again, even when I'm there, I typically try to make sure that those people don't take a step back, because I think that derails it. I don't want to have to get into a building if I haven't been there for 2 or 3 weeks, and then all of a sudden sit there and act like I'm, the guy who's going to say everything. That's not my role. So there's a lot of autonomy. There is a tremendous amount of autonomy.
Sounds like there is, yeah, which is a good thing.
So you got to trust people. You got to find some people you can trust, and that's what you're talking about. And I'm lucky that I've got people like that I can trust. I'm sure you do too, and that's what you're describing, Heather, or whoever it is. I think that one of the things that I like about it is that the more spread out you are, the more out of the weeds you have to come. And
What does that mean?
You have to kind of not be down in the detail as much. You have to kind of bring yourself up a little bit.
Yep.
And I think it gives you the license to ask dumb questions, which...
The best questions.
Right, or the best questions, which is you just walk in and you can ask questions like, what are we trying to do here? What are we trying to accomplish? And make sure that there's an answer to that question. Mm-hmm. And if that answer is fuzzy, then you've got a problem. But you don't have to walk in there and know what's going on because you were at another market or whatever. So that it gives you that sort of ability to do that. I think it's good.
Okay. Do you ever get surprised by people where they're in a different market, or maybe even in your, in your own station? You talk through stuff with them 2, 3, 4 times, maybe even if it's a format change, they've actually played you tapes, and you go like, okay, that's what it's going to be, and then it gets on the air, and it's like, what is that? What happened there?
Yeah,
do you guys
that's
get that?
one of the true joys of the job is you have this vision in your head, and then you hand the vision over to people, and it doesn't come out anything like it was in your head. And I think it's a really important skill to acquire, to be able to recognize that something you thought of came out differently and is still really, really good, in fact, maybe better. But just because it's not yours doesn't mean it was wrong. And you see that, I think, in a lot of young and maybe inexperienced or immature managers where it has to be their way or it's wrong. It's a learned skill to be able to say, that's not my idea, and there's things I wouldn't have done that you did, but it's actually really good.
Okay. This may be kind of a tough one. How do you walk the line if you have to walk that line? How do you walk the line? Usually when you say leadership, you would immediately think of there's the leader and there's everybody below them. But in most instances, certainly for everybody here, there's the leader and everybody below them, but there's also somebody or people up at top that are leading you, and you have to do both. You have to kind of manage them and lead downward, and sometimes the corporate wants safe, usually, they don't want any surprises, but you have to be entrepreneurial, and you have to take risk, and you have to wing it a lot of times, and they don't like that. How do you do that? Brad, everybody take a shot at that one. Sorry. Just say pass and just move on.
Look, I often joke that someone in a management position, or in my position, you spend 50% of your day making sure things are done the Chorus way, and the other 50% of your day making sure that things aren't done the Chorus way. Because
I totally agree with that.
right?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that.
Because if you just fit inside that corporate box,
Yeah.
you're not gonna do exciting radio because you're so worried about the box. So you got to be focused on all the other stuff, not the box. But you have to protect the company.
Sure,
So you got to.
sure.
So 50% of the day you got to protect the company. The other 50%, make great radio. That's what we're supposed to do.
Same for everybody, pretty much, yeah?
I've never really given it a lot of thought, to be honest. Maybe I should. I think if our jobs are, whatever our jobs are, is to be, to do the right thing for the customer or the listener or the staff or whatever that is. And I think if you're guided by doing the right thing and you believe you're doing the right thing, that's, to me, where I try to land with things. I mean, I'm lucky. I've had a run of amazing bosses who, have given me a lot of room and a lot of rope. And we're responsible to hit targets. And yes, there are the Rogers things I need to do, and I'm pretty open about those. So I think if you're honest and you're open and you're aiming to do the right thing, that the rest of it sort of takes care of itself.
Okay. Let me throw out something that's, it's the worst part of a manager's job. It's the worst part of a leader's job, and that's to deal with layoffs and firings. And they, whether they come in waves or they don't, particularly when it's a group and it's not one person. One person sometimes can maybe be a little easier. It's still difficult, but maybe a little easier because maybe that person did something wrong. But when somebody did nothing wrong and you still got to do it, brutal. It's a brutal thing to do. How do you? I was always uncomfortable with power when I was a manager. I just didn't like power. I love being the leader, but I always felt a huge weight on my shoulders. I had to worry about people's families that were working for me, and it weighed in a lot of decisions. Do you guys feel that too? And when it comes time to do layoffs or that kind of stuff?
Absolutely. If you don't, you're probably a sociopath. If you don't care. But you also have a responsibility as a leader to the other. If you have 100 people and 5 people need to be laid off because 95 need a job, I think you have a responsibility to the whole room, and you have to think about the greater good. It is the worst part about being a manager. I think it's the most difficult thing. But if you're honest and straightforward and transparent as much as you can be, then I think the rest of the people left respect you, and those who whose careers are negatively impacted eventually probably come around and forgive you down the road, just by being honest and real about things.
I think that most of the time you have to be a cheerleader. I think you got to pick your spots when you have to do stuff like that. I think the mistake that sometimes we make is standing in front of people and delivering bad news, and then trying to kind of say, but hey, it's going to be great because, and I found that you need to give people that little bit of space, whether it's just overnight or whatever, to just kind of digest it, grieve, whatever, then come back in the next day and start to talk about the future. But when you start to kind of mash that together, people kind of go, geez, man, don't you have a heart or whatever? But it's kind of your job to pick everybody up. It's a matter of timing and style, I think.
Okay. Anybody else? No?
Ideally, you don't have to do it. I mean, if a company our size, we're lucky to have so many radio stations, and if you know that, bad shit's going to happen, perhaps in the natural course of attrition, you can shuffle people and preserve people and hopefully get to the goal you need to get to without having to do things like that too often.
Okay.
It doesn't always work.
In this same vein, I wanted to ask Julie a question because I'm just super curious because I was on the opposite side of the fence from you at that time when this transpired. Julie, for those of you who don't know, Julie was running KISS FM and she took over CHFI. I think that was right when you first took over CHFI. And she fired Aaron Davis and put on Mad Dog and Billy. Now, in retrospect, that turned out to be a really bad decision. However,
Not the only one I've made.
no, hold on. I'm
Many
going to give her the biggest compliment I could ever give somebody, I think. Because one of the things that being a leader, a true leader is, and any book you pick up, anybody will tell you, you got to see a mistake, you got to recognize it, and you got to say, you know what, I got to fix this, and I got to fix this now. And she did. In 9 months, 10 months, somewhere in there.
I think it was about 15 months.
Okay. And I was on the other side because I was managing Easy Rock, and we had passed them. We were the number one station, and she sucked away our morning team to do that. So you pretty much killed the station, really. I mean, that probably cost. No, really, seriously.
I guess I technically killed 2 stations. I killed CHFI for a while there too.
So here's the question. And if you want to be a leader, this is what you're going to have to deal with. What was it like when you said, I got to call her back after letting her go and offer her a job? What's it like just as you're about to dial the phone, or if that's the way it was, to call her and meet? How'd that conversation go, and then how did you work it out? How did you lead her after she came back? I mean, all of those seem like really hard things. Maybe they weren't for you. I don't know.
Well, geez. I mean, the hard part was not calling Aaron Davis. If you know Aaron Davis, she's a champ. So that was not the hard part. The hard part was actually making the decision that after all was said and done, I don't want to call it an experiment because that doesn't do justice to the work that went into it by the people. The hard part was that, I had to let Mad Dog and Billy go. And that was a show that was doing well in Toronto on KISS. And KISS was, flip formats to Jack. And we felt that CHFI needed a new show. And Erin would be the first one to say that the show she was doing at the time was not working. So the hard part was really having to put 2 people out of work, which is never fun. And I remember the story really well. Gary Miles, it was the day before a research meeting. Chuck McCoy was my boss. And we were going in the night before. Gary Miles said to me, what are you going to do when they ask you the question? And by the way, every vice president and EVP and CEO from Rogers was always in my office for 15 months, lined up at the door. What have you done today to fix the problem? I think I would say to them, why don't you just fire me? And they're like, no way, you fucked it, you're fixing it. No, please, come on. Tony Viner's words.
Welcome to leadership.
Truth. And Tony, another mentor, always kind, very tough, even when he swears at you. But Gary Miles said, well, what are you going to say when you walk into that boardroom tomorrow? What are you going to say about what you think we should do? And I said, I think we should hire Aaron Davis back. And in the boardroom, frankly, I think it kind of got laughed at just because you're crazy. She's never going to come back to work. And I think the lesson in it was, first of all, that I worked for a great company, and they, despite the shit that I caused, they continued to give me chances, and still continue to give me chances. And they said, give it a go, see what happens. And talking to Aaron was the easiest part. I mean, I just apologized and said, that was, a mistake, and I'm really sorry, and what do you think about coming back? And the rest was honestly, that was the easy part.
Okay, thanks. Always wanted to know that.
And then you were dead, Pat.
Yeah, and then I retired.
That
Awesome.
I'm not sorry about. That was my job.
Radio Player Canada, great place to start. Unison for the industry. What other things do you think should be worked on together, and would be good to be worked on together, and pull as a team, as one big unit, radio in general, using its power? What would be good? I know you're talking about HD here a little earlier in the last session.
Well, I think Radio Player has set a good example, because it's, for a change, we got together and thought, what would a listener want? not what we want them to want, but what they want, and we gave it to them.
Yeah.
I'm kind of proud of the business for doing that.
Okay.
Yeah, I think whether or not Radio Player reaches critical mass, I think the more important thing is what Brad said, is that we all came together. And if we can come together like that and build Radio Connects into a very, very powerful advocacy group, if we can come together and lobby the regulators, if we can come together as an industry to be better as an industry, that's fantastic. That's what we need to be doing.
I think the technology piece is a good one to agree on. We talked about this an hour ago, is just if people are a little more open about technology and what they're experimenting with, because it's something like HD is not going to be one company at a time. It's going to be whether the industry goes forward or not.
Yeah, I see the Radio Player play as really low-hanging fruit. If we couldn't have come together on something as simple as that, then we'd be in some real serious trouble as an industry. So for me, I came out of that excited with, well, now what can we do? Because, as a part of a smaller broadcaster, you've got, everyone has big ideas, but we all know that some of them you can't exactly execute unless we all come together on it. So we all research the hell out of our stations, and we test everything, and we've got more data than we've ever had in our lives, and we use it to make the best products that we possibly can. And there's always a lot of doom and gloom, it seems, to meetings like this about how is our industry going to survive. But 10 years ago, our reach was like 90%, and today it's 86%, and that was pre-iPhone. So 10 years later, we're down a measly 4%. So I think we're doing okay. When you compare us to our other classic medias like print and television, I think we're doing awesome.
Oh, yeah.
So for me, it's like, okay, we're competitors in market, but as an industry, what is next for us to evolve the product? And that same research keeps coming back, and there's all this talk about about our advertising model. And it's like, it's not that our reach is down. It's, revenues are clearly down when things happen. So is it time to start, looking at what I consider, I don't know about the rest of you at the table, but I consider it to be a pretty antiquated advertising model that we're still out there selling 30s and 60s. And, when everything else out there tells us that people want shorter ads. So, with that, the big pushback I get as a PD standing across from my GSM is national never go for it. Agencies never go for it. But I'm looking at like 4 heads of pretty big companies that can pretty much tell the agencies this is the direction we want to go. So my challenge is kind of like, is there a way to evolve the business of the radio? Because I've never had more faith in the product. The product I think is great. I think we keep dissecting it to death, but I think we're all doing a really good job on that. So what ultimately is the biggest threat to the industry. And if that's, you know, the revenue stream, which ultimately is what we're all out to drive, then maybe it's time to start taking a look at that and thinking, you know, maybe there's a chance to evolve it a little, because I don't think we're losing advertisers who've been with radio for 20 years because they've lost their faith in radio. I think we lose them because something cool and new's come along and they want to give it a try. We've all done it ourselves. You've done bus backs, you get sick of bus backs, you do billboards. You're sick of billboards, you try something else, right? So for us to have the expectation on our own clients to stick with us, even though there's all these new cool flashy things out there, you know, what can we do to challenge them beyond the digital space? Because ultimately the majority of our revenue is when we say we'll be right back.
I think the biggest threat, to answer your question, I think the biggest threat to the radio industry is the radio industry's memory. Because we remember the way things were. We remember what our margin was. We remember how much money we made. We remember all those different things, and then we compare that to this. Well, this isn't bad. This is actually, to your point, this is good.
Yeah.
But,
yeah, no, for sure.
But we remember money falling out of the sky. Now money's still coming in. It's just not coming in like it used to. But we feel like bums because it's not coming in like that. I always think about the thing, you know, the Men in Black thing where they hold the thing up and flash and you forget everything. If we could do that to our business, it'd be the best thing we ever did because we'd start fresh, just like all the competitive media is.
Yeah, I don't think our biggest threat is streaming services or whatever has been thrown at radio over the last decade. Our biggest threat's ourselves. I don't think we step back and take a look at the product enough and realize that we're actually delivering something that people still really consume. Like, there's presentation after presentation, year after year at this very festival that shows that a passion index for what we do still exists. But we take a score of 90% that drops to 87 and think that the world is ending. But, you know, and it's not, and it's just like, it's almost a case of, if I can't have it all, then I don't want any of it. And it's like, that's just, I think it's really narrow-sighted, and I think it's ultimately our biggest threat is each other.
I have a different perspective, which is that I actually think this industry works together exceedingly well. It is so rare to see a conference like this or to see other gatherings, whether it's a BCAB or a WAB or an OAB, where competitors gladly meet each other. We hang out, we chat about some things that are happening in the industry. I think it's incredibly positive. And I've got now an exposure in my career to the other side, the television business. They don't do anything. We don't talk. There is zero get-togethers like this. If they're happening, I'm not invited, so maybe I'm the odd man out. But I will tell you, as an industry, I think radio, we've always kind of considered, I think, ourselves a little insecure, and that's maybe the issue. We're always, we're the radio guys. The TV guys are the fancy ones with the cameras and the lights and everything else. And I will tell you, from looking at it from both sides, radio is the absolute cooler medium. It is the better medium. It is the more effective medium. It's the one that we actually have more, maybe not the right word, control over in the context of the day-to-day maneuverability of it, where TV is very large and it's very difficult to steer, and it takes a long time to make adjustments that resonate with the audience in terms of the same type of things that we do on radio. So I actually think radio is in a spectacular spot. Yeah, the business is rough right now, no question about it, but I think as an industry, we already work together so well, it would be really hard to find other areas where we could turn it up a bit and make it even better.
Great.
That's my perspective.
Yeah, no, it's cool. We're just about out of time. I just want to, this was just my question, because I'm just curious as to what you guys are going to say. Hypothetical, and I don't even know if this is leadership or not, although I guess it is of where you're going to go. Let's just say you walk out of here tonight and you hit the lotto 649 and you have $110 million now. You're allowed to buy any radio station that's in your chain that you know really well. You can just pick any one, $50 million. You pay the $50 million because your kids are saying, Mom, Dad, I want to be in radio. I want to follow in your footsteps. I want to go in the future, buy a radio station. And you do. You know the radio station. What would you do different with it? With no debt, no corporate, no Bay Street, no anything, and you can do whatever you want, and you have $60 million sitting home in the bank that you're not going to be starving. What would you do different, if anything? Or would you just say, here's $1 million each to the kids, you're on your own?
I'll throw this out there. If I were starting from scratch, think about geography and does it really matter? Like, a radio station right now has a very expensive physical plant. We keep the lights on. If you just said the only thing that matters is entertaining listeners, and maybe my morning guy is in Bern, Switzerland, and my afternoon host is in Brisbane, and my midday person's in Brandon, and who cares? Do I have to have 12,000 square feet in downtown Toronto eating away at my profits? Can my advertising all be sold programmatically? Do I have to have a sales team? How could I do things completely different if I were looking at it like Spotify looks at their business or other digital startups look at their business? And then I'd probably go broke. So I'll take it all back. I would buy Boom and hire Wayne Webster and just let the money flow in.
Anybody else want to weigh in on that one?
I'd go the opposite to what you originally said, which is I would double the staff immediately and make sure they had the coolest facility in X city, whatever city it is. Open space, allow them to collaborate and create content nonstop and sell advertising and brand partnerships. But I would surround myself with as many people as humanly possible and then just let them go at it. And kids, I would not fire Aaron Davis.
Anybody else?
I think my initial reaction would be to, if it was a standalone, competing with all of us.
50 million, you could buy the whole market of Regina, probably. You could have them all. Just kidding.
Maybe
No,
more
sorry.
than that.
So I think go super local. One of the things I'm proud of that we're doing in Winnipeg is we've branded the station Peggy, one of our FMs.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what I'm proud of is that you can't take that brand and put it into another market. It's completely unique to that market. And I think super local.
Okay.
Because I think it would set you apart from everything around you.
Sure.
I'd buy X and change nothing because the place is perfect. But I wouldn't pay $50 million because that would be too much.
Thank you, everyone. Our time is up, and man, that went by fast.